Wars are expensive. But when you think about who pays the bill, you are probably mistaken. Modern wars are not financed through tax invoices sent directly to citizens or extra deductions appearing on payroll statements. Stock markets often rise when conflicts begin. Defense stocks gain value. Politicians declare that the nation is strong enough to bear the burden. Everything appears to be under control. Yet what is visible is only the surface of reality. In the Old World, the cost of war was paid immediately. In medieval Europe, when a king wanted to go to war, his options were limited: raise taxes, seize land, or debase the currency. Every method inflicted pain immediately. Throughout the Hundred Years' War, which lasted from 1337 to 1453, the English and French monarchies repeatedly taxed merchants, clergy, and landowners. The population was crushed under the pressure, and rebellions became commonplace. Spain fell into the same trap in the 16th century. Endless military campaigns across Europe and the Americas continuously drained the royal treasury. Spain defaulted repeatedly in 1557, 1575, and 1596. Even the silver flowing from the New World was not enough to finance its military ambitions. The bill arrived early, and it was devastating. The rule at the time was simple: if you want war, you must take money from someone. This extraction was immediate, and immediate extraction generated resistance. When the Bank of England was established in 1694, government finance changed fundamentally. Governments could now borrow on a large scale by selling long-term bonds to private investors. The cost of war could be pushed into the future. By the end of the Napoleonic Wars, in 1815, Britain's debt-to-GDP ratio had exceeded 200%. But the important point was not the number itself, it was that war had become financeable. Perpetual bonds, financial instruments in which only interest is paid and the principal is never repaid, spread the burden across decades. What had once been a visible tax became a long-term obligation. Once governments discovered this system, there was no turning back. During the American Civil War, the government printed paper money that was not backed by gold. Inflation inevitably followed. The First World War took this model to a much larger scale. When bond issuance alone proved insufficient, governments suspended the gold standard and expanded the money supply. The result appeared most dramatically in Germany. In 1923, hyperinflation wiped out the savings of the middle class. The mark became worthless paper. Millions of people living on fixed incomes were impoverished within days. Those who held foreign assets or real estate, by contrast, survived. Inflation is not an unfortunate side effect of war. It is a mechanism. When governments cannot collect enough taxes and cannot borrow cheaply enough, they expand the money supply. That expansion erodes the purchasing power of existing money. No invoice is issued, but the extraction takes place. During the Second World War, the United States debt-to-GDP ratio rose from around 40% in 1941 to more than 120% by 1946. How was this enormous burden reduced after the war? Not primarily through tax increases. It was reduced through a decades-long silent strategy: financial repression. Interest rates were kept artificially low while inflation ran higher. If your government bond yields 2% while inflation is 4%, you lose purchasing power every year. The government repays its debts with cheaper money. This is not a conspiracy, it is simple arithmetic. Savers lose, borrowers win. And because governments are the world's largest borrowers, they benefit the most. The pattern is clear: debt costs are pushed into the future. Inflation costs spread downward through society. Financial repression distributes the burden quietly over decades. Meanwhile, owners of productive assets experience a very different reality. During the Second World War, American industrial giants such as General Motors, Boeing, and Lockheed shifted to wartime production and secured major government contracts. Corporate profits exploded in certain sectors. Following September 11, during the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, companies such as Halliburton, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon captured large portions of trillions of dollars in military spending. Those who owned shares in these companies experienced war not as a burden, but as income. Now consider the person living on a fixed wage. If food, rent, and energy prices rise by 6 to 8% while wages increase by only 2 to 3%, that person absorbs the difference. Inflation is a tax imposed without legislation. And like all taxes, it hits the financially vulnerable the hardest. Those who hold cash in bank accounts quietly lose purchasing power. Owners of real estate, stocks, and commodities possess a natural hedge against that erosion. The post-2001 wars demonstrated the modern version of this structure. The United States did not impose broad-based tax increases to finance the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Instead, federal debt doubled between 2001 and 2008. The bill was postponed. Borrowing filled the gap. Today, U.S. federal debt exceeds 120% of GDP. Annual interest payments have become one of the largest items in the federal budget. These payments must be made before new policies can be funded. They create pressure on central banks and reduce fiscal flexibility. When interest rates rose sharply in 2022 and 2023 to combat inflation, the cost of servicing accumulated debt also increased dramatically. Governments become trapped, allow inflation to erode purchasing power or raise interest rates and strain the financial system. Either option ultimately sends the bill to ordinary citizens. In the early 2020s, large fiscal stimulus programs, emergency spending, and geopolitical tensions arrived simultaneously. The money supply expanded dramatically. Between 2021 and 2023, inflation surged across much of the Western world. Official explanations emphasized supply chain disruptions and pandemic-related distortions. These were important factors, but a deeper reality lay beneath them. When governments spend aggressively and finance that spending through central bank-facilitated mechanisms, purchasing power shifts. And it always shifts away from those holding money. A dramatic example of military spending-driven inflation also occurred during the 1970s. The combination of Vietnam War expenditures and oil shocks severely damaged the purchasing power of the American middle class. Those who owned oil-producing assets experienced a very different outcome. War finance does not affect everyone equally. The mechanism itself prevents that. The truth is this: wars are almost never paid for by those who initiate them. Soldiers go to the front lines, the bill is sent to the future. You may never see a line labeled "war tax" on your paycheck. But you have seen food, rent, and energy prices rise in recent years. You have watched government deficits reach trillions. You have heard about central bank balance sheets reaching record levels. These are not abstract numbers, they are the accounting records of geopolitical decisions. Those who design the financial system do not construct it in ways that harm themselves. History is clear on this point: governments borrow, central banks facilitate, money loses value, assets adjust, wages lag behind, and wealth becomes increasingly concentrated. Understanding this is a foundation of financial literacy. It helps you recognize the risks of holding only cash in an inflationary environment. It helps you understand why asset ownership matters. It helps you see the structural incentives that large-scale borrowing creates for policymakers. Wars are loud. The payment system behind them is silent. And in finance, it is always the silent mechanisms that shape your future.